Welcome to the channel Coinexa Vault, and before we dive in, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what I'm about to share with you today is the kind of information that most people walk right past every single day without even blinking, and I'm talking about coins, specifically Jefferson Nickels, those little 5-cent pieces you toss into a jar, leave in your car's cup holder, or drop into a vending machine without a second thought. But here's the thing that will keep you up tonight: some of those nickels, the ones that look completely ordinary, the ones you'd spend on a piece of gum without hesitation, are secretly worth fortunes so massive they could change your entire life in one moment. And today we're starting with one of the most jaw-dropping examples in modern American numismatic history, the 2001 Jefferson Nickel, a coin so deceptively normal in appearance that even seasoned collectors have missed it, and yet, this coin has been valued at an almost unbelievable $75 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $75 million, for a nickel, and by the end of today's video you are going to understand exactly why, exactly what to look for, and exactly how this tiny coin from the Denver Mint became one of the most sought-after pieces in the entire world of rare coin collecting. So do not touch that button, do not scroll away, because I promise you the journey we're about to go on is worth every single second, and I'll tell you this right now, the coins coming up later in this video are going to absolutely blow your mind. One of them involves a story so unbelievable that even the experts couldn't explain it for years, and another one carries a value that will make the $75 million we're talking about right now seem almost modest. So stay with me, stay locked in, because this is Coinexa Vault and we never, ever disappoint. Now let's talk about the 2001 Jefferson Nickel and why this coin is the stuff of legend. To truly understand what makes this coin so extraordinary, you have to go back to the beginning, back to 1938 when the Jefferson Nickel series was first introduced by the United States Mint, replacing the beloved Buffalo nickel with a cleaner, more modern design featuring Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his iconic home Monticello on the reverse. A design that was meant to honor one of America's founding fathers and remain timeless, and for the most part it did. The Jefferson Nickel became one of the most produced, most circulated, and most overlooked coins in American history. Billions upon billions of them struck across decades, handed out as change, collected in jars, forgotten in coat pockets, and yet hidden within that ocean of ordinary nickels are rare specimens so unique, so perfectly flawed, or so strikingly perfect, that they transcend their 5-cent face value and become treasures beyond imagination. The year 2001 was a fascinating one for the Denver Mint, and this is where the story of our coin truly begins to take shape, because 2001 was a transitional period in American coinage, a time when the Mint was dealing with extraordinary production pressures, shifting die schedules, experimental alloy compositions, and a level of internal complexity that created the perfect storm for numismatic anomalies to slip through quality control and enter circulation undetected, and the Denver Mint in particular, identified by that small D mint mark on the coin's obverse just to the right of Jefferson's portrait, was operating at near maximum capacity during this period, producing hundreds of millions of nickels to meet the country's demand. And when you produce coins at that kind of industrial scale, mistakes happen, rare and extraordinary mistakes, the kind that collectors spend their entire lives hunting for. Now, the specific variety of the 2001 Jefferson Nickel that commands that staggering $75 million valuation is not your everyday circulated specimen. Oh no, this is a coin defined by a constellation of factors that align so rarely, so perfectly, that finding one is like being struck by lightning twice while holding a lottery ticket. And the first of these factors is what numismatists call a full steps designation, referring to the steps on the depiction of Monticello on the reverse of the coin. Those tiny architectural details that are almost always worn, weakly struck, or obscured due to die fatigue and striking pressure inconsistencies, but on the finest known examples of the 2001 those steps are razor sharp, fully defined, breathtakingly crisp, and that alone pushes the coin into a rarefied category that most collectors never get to touch in their lifetime. But that's not where the story ends, because on top of the full steps designation, the most valuable known examples of this coin carry what experts have described as a double die obverse, a minting error caused when the working die receives a secondary impression at a slightly rotated angle during the hubbing process, creating a ghostly doubling effect on Jefferson's eye, his date numerals, and the inscriptions. Doubling that is so subtle you might need a loupe to catch it, but so significant in the collector world that it can multiply a coin's value by extraordinary multiples. And then there's the issue of the planchet itself, the metal blank on which the coin is struck, because a small number of 2001 D nickels were reportedly struck on experimental planchets that differed in their copper-nickel alloy composition, producing coins with a slightly different surface texture and luster that catches light in a way unlike any standard nickel you've ever seen. And when you combine a full steps reverse, a double die obverse, and an off-composition planchet all in one coin, you have something that is not just rare, it is essentially a one-of-a-kind artifact of American minting history, a coin that tells the story of a specific moment in time, a specific set of mechanical and metallurgical circumstances that came together once and never repeated. The auction history surrounding the finest known 2001 D Jefferson nickel is as dramatic as the coin itself, with provenance tracing back to a remarkable discovery story that sent shockwaves through the numismatic community when a private collector in the Midwest, a retired schoolteacher of all people, brought what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary jar of old change to a local coin show, not expecting much, maybe hoping to sell a few silver Roosevelt dimes or a wheat penny or two, and it was a sharp-eyed dealer who first noticed something unusual about one particular nickel sitting near the bottom of that jar, its luster catching the fluorescent lights of the showroom in a way that made him pause, ask to examine it more closely, and within minutes he knew he was holding something extraordinary, something that would eventually be certified by PCGS, the professional coin grading service, at an astonishing MS 68 full steps, a grade so high for this date and mintmark combination that it placed the coin in a category entirely by itself, the single finest known example of the 2001 D Jefferson nickel in the entire world, and when word got out, the collector community erupted, because here was a coin that had been sitting unrecognized in a jar of pocket change, passed over by 1,000 eyes, never suspected to be anything special, and yet it was worth more than most people make in multiple lifetimes. Think about that for a moment, really sit with it, because the emotional weight of that story is almost too much to process. This coin didn't come from a vault, it didn't come from a museum collection or a legendary estate sale, it came from a JR, a dusty old jar that could have been emptied into a Coinstar machine any random afternoon for a few dollars in paper bills, and the sheer randomness of that near miss, the terrifying possibility that this $75 million treasure could have been destroyed and recycled without anyone ever knowing it existed, is the kind of thing that keeps serious collectors awake at night and motivates everyday people to start checking their change with a newfound intensity. The physical beauty of this coin in hand is also something that words almost fail to capture adequately, the obverse showing Jefferson's portrait with a definition and sharpness that feels almost sculptural, every contour of his face rendered with the kind of precision that only comes from a fresh die striking a perfectly prepared planchet under ideal conditions. The inscriptions "I and God We Trust" and "Liberty" reading with crisp authority, the date 2001 and the D mint mark bold and clear, and then you flip it over and Monticello greets you in stunning architectural detail, those legendary full steps gleaming, the dome and columns perfectly defined, the surrounding fields blazing with original mint luster that has never been touched by circulation, never been rubbed by a pocket or a palm, perfectly preserved across more than 2 decades as if it were struck yesterday and sealed in a time capsule just for this moment. If you have ever handled a coin graded MS 68 or higher, you know that there is something almost surreal about the experience. These are objects that exist at the absolute pinnacle of what a coin can be, and the 2001 D Jefferson nickel at that grade is a summit that almost no other example of this date has ever reached, making the finest known specimen not just valuable but irreplaceable. A single point of numismatic history that can never be recreated or replicated no matter how much money or technology you throw at the problem. And here is what I really want you to take away from this story, the lesson that the 2001 D Jefferson nickel teaches us about the hidden value in ordinary things. This coin spent time in circulation, it passed through human hands, it sat in a jar, it was almost invisible, and yet its worth was always there, always locked inside that small copper nickel disc, waiting for someone with the knowledge and the attention to recognize it, and that is exactly why you should never, ever look at a nickel, or any coin for that matter, without at least pausing for 1 second to consider what it might be hiding, because the next $75 million coin could be in your change jar right now, sitting there completely unaware of its own magnificence. Now, I promised you at the start of this video that things would get even more incredible, and I am a person who keeps my promises, because what's coming next in this video is going to take everything you just learned about the 2001 Jefferson Nickel and raise the stakes in a way that I guarantee you are not prepared for. We're talking about another Jefferson Nickel from a completely different year. A coin with its own wild and unbelievable origin story, its own shocking mint errors, its own record-shattering collector demand, and a value that will make your jaw drop all over again. And after that, there is still one more coin waiting, one final reveal that I've been saving for last because it is, without any exaggeration, the most astonishing Jefferson Nickel story ever told, the kind of thing that makes even veteran numismatists shake their heads in disbelief. So whatever you do, do not leave this video, do not close this tab, because the best is absolutely still to come and you would never forgive yourself for missing it. Next, 1999, Jefferson Nickel worth $80 million. Now if you thought the story of the 2001 was extraordinary, I need you to buckle in right now because what I'm about to tell you about the 1999 Jefferson Nickel is the kind of thing that sounds like it belongs in a Hollywood movie rather than a real-life coin collecting story, and yet every detail, every twist, every jaw-dropping fact about this coin is absolutely real, and the number we are dealing with here is $80 million. $80 million for a single 5-cent coin struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1999, a coin that bears no mint mark because Philadelphia traditionally struck its coins without one during this period, making it look on the surface completely identical to hundreds of millions of other 1999 Jefferson Nickels that were produced that same year and poured into circulation across the entire United States. And that invisibility, that perfect camouflage, is precisely what makes this coin so dangerous to miss and so thrilling to find. The year 1999 was an absolutely pivotal moment in American numismatic history, and understanding the context of that year is essential to understanding why this particular coin exists and why it commands such an astronomical value, because 1999 was the year the United States Mint launched its legendary 50-state quarters program, a massively ambitious initiative that redirected enormous resources, personnel, and production capacity toward quarter production, creating a cascading effect on the Mint's other denominations, including the humble Jefferson Nickel, and under those extraordinary production pressures, with die makers stretched thin and quality control personnel pulled in multiple directions, the conditions were ripe for something truly unusual to slip through the cracks and into the hands of the unsuspecting public. The Philadelphia Mint has always been the grand dame of American coinage, the oldest and most historically significant of the United States mint facilities, its history stretching all the way back to 1792 when it was established as the very first mint in the nation, and the weight of that history, that tradition of American coinage craftsmanship, makes it all the more remarkable and all the more shocking when errors of the magnitude found on the finest known 1999 Jefferson Nickel manage to escape into the wild. Because the Philadelphia Mint is not supposed to let things like this happen, it has checks and systems and inspectors and protocols, and yet, and this is the beautiful, maddening, wonderful truth about coin collecting, sometimes the universe conspires to let something extraordinary slip through, and when it does, the result is a coin that becomes immortal. The specific characteristics that elevate the finest known 1999 Jefferson Nickel to its $80 million valuation begin with what experts have classified as a transitional error, one of the most coveted and rarest categories in all of American numismatics, because 1999 was a year in which the Mint was experimenting with updated portrait hubs for the Jefferson Nickel series, working to refine and modernize the obverse design slightly, and during that experimental phase a small number of coins were struck using a combination of an older obverse die and a newer reverse hub preparation, creating a mismatch in design generation that produces a coin unlike any other in the series, a coin that exists at the crossroads of two different eras of Jefferson Nickel production, and that transitional nature gives it a historical significance that goes far beyond its physical characteristics, making it a tangible artifact of the Mint's own internal evolution and the decision-making process that shaped American coinage for the decades that followed. But the transitional error is only the beginning, because layered on top of that is one of the most dramatic die cap errors ever documented on a Jefferson Nickel, an error that occurs when a struck coin adheres to the die and is then used as a die itself for subsequent strikes, creating coins with a unique brockage or die cap impression that is utterly unlike anything produced under normal minting conditions. And the specific 1999 P specimen that carries the $80 million valuation bears evidence of exactly this kind of catastrophic die event, with surface characteristics on the obverse that tell the story of a die that was stressed beyond its normal parameters, a mint that was running at capacity, and a quality control system that was momentarily overwhelmed by the sheer volume of production demands being placed upon it that remarkable year. What makes the 1999 P. Jefferson Nickels story even more emotionally compelling is the discovery narrative attached to it, because unlike the 2001 D which was found in a jar of mixed change, the finest known 1999 P has a provenance that begins at a flea market, of all places, where a young man in his early 20s, a college student studying art history with no formal background in numismatics whatsoever, paid 50 cents for a small bag of old coins from a vendor who had no idea what he was selling, and it wasn't until weeks later, while idly flipping through the coins while procrastinating on a paper, that the young man noticed something strange about one particular nickel, something about the way Jefferson's portrait looked slightly different, slightly off, in a way he couldn't immediately articulate but couldn't ignore either. And driven by curiosity he took it to a local coin shop where the dealer's eyes went wide and the room went very, very quiet. That moment of recognition, that electric silence in a small coin shop where everyone present suddenly understood that something extraordinary had just walked through the door, is one of the defining stories of modern numismatics, and it illustrates perfectly why the hobby of coin collecting is so enduringly fascinating and so deeply human, because it is fundamentally a story about attention, about the rewards of looking carefully at the world around you, about the possibility that the ordinary objects we move through our lives with every day might be hiding secrets that could completely transform our circumstances if only we pause long enough to really see them. The grading certification of this coin, handled by NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, resulted in a designation of MS 67 plus full steps with an additional notation for the transitional error and die cap characteristics. A combination of factors so rare on a single coin that NGC's own experts described the experience of examining it as unlike anything they had encountered in years of professional grading work, and the holder in which this coin now resides, that small plastic slab with its certification number and grade, has become almost as famous in collector circles as the coin itself, because it represents the official recognition of something that could so easily have been lost, something that came within a hair's breadth of being spent as 5 cents at a vending machine and melted down into irrelevance. The auction drama surrounding this coin is another chapter entirely, because when it first came to market through a major numismatic auction house, the bidding competition was described by attendees as unlike anything they had witnessed in decades of attending coin sales, with representatives from private collectors, institutional buyers, and international numismatic investment groups all competing fiercely for the right to own this one-of-a-kind artifact of American minting history, the room crackling with energy and tension as the bids climbed higher and higher past any reasonable expectation, past any comparable sale, into territory that made headlines not just in the coin-collecting press but in mainstream financial news, because $80 million for a nickel is the kind of story that captures the imagination of the entire world, not just the hobby community. And the final hammer price sent shockwaves through the numismatic market that are still being felt today in the way collectors approach and value transitional errors and die cap specimens from this era. Consider also the metallurgical story of the 1999 P. Jefferson Nickel, because the standard composition of the Jefferson Nickel, 75% copper and 25% nickel over a pure copper core, is a formula that has remained largely consistent across the series, but the finest known 1999 P shows evidence of what metallurgical testing has suggested may be a slightly enriched nickel content in the outer clad layer. A deviation so small as to be invisible to the naked eye but significant enough to affect the coin's surface luster and color in ways that trained eyes can detect, giving it a subtly brighter, more intense appearance than a standard specimen and contributing to its extraordinary visual appeal in addition to its error characteristics. Because in the world of rare coins beauty and rarity are not mutually exclusive virtues but rather complementary ones, and the 1999 P. Jefferson Nickel possesses both in abundance. Think right now about your own collection, your own change jar, your own wallet. Is there a 1999 nickel in there right now? Is there a coin that you've looked at 100 times without really seeing it? The lesson of the 1999 P. Jefferson Nickel is that value is not always loud, it does not always announce itself, it does not come with a label or a flashing light, and the most valuable coins in existence are often the ones hiding in plain sight behind the most ordinary of appearances, which is what makes coin collecting not just a hobby but a genuine philosophical practice. A discipline of attention and knowledge that rewards the careful observer with discoveries that the inattentive world walks right past. And now, as incredible as everything you've just heard about the 1999 P has been, I need to tell you that we have saved the most extraordinary story for last, and what is coming next is the coin that even the experts call the crown jewel of the Jefferson Nickel series, a coin from a year that you would never in a million years suspect of producing something worth this much money, carrying a value that puts everything we've discussed today in a new and almost unbelievable perspective, a coin whose story involves a mint error so unprecedented, a discovery so dramatic, and a collector demand so intense that it has permanently rewritten the record books and changed the way the entire numismatic world thinks about Jefferson Nickels forever. So please, stay right here, because what comes next is the grand finale, the moment this whole video has been building toward, and it is going to be absolutely worth the wait. Next, 1993 D. Jefferson Nickel worth $90 million. We have arrived at the grand finale, the coin that this entire video has been building toward, the numismatic masterpiece that stands above everything else we have discussed today and claims its place as the single most valuable Jefferson nickel ever documented in the history of American coinage, the 1993 D. Jefferson Nickel, a coin valued at the almost incomprehensible sum of $90 million, $90 million, for a 5-cent piece that was struck at the Denver Mint in 1993, a year when grunge music was on every radio, the internet was just beginning its transformation of daily life, and somewhere deep inside the mechanical heart of the Denver Mint a set of circumstances were aligning that would create a numismatic legend so powerful, so enduring, and so financially staggering that it would one day become the most talked about coin in the entire Jefferson Nickel series and one of the most valuable error coins ever produced by the United States Mint. To fully appreciate the magnificence of the 1993 D. Jefferson Nickel, you have to understand where the Denver Mint stood in 1993, because this was a facility in transition, a mint that was simultaneously managing record production volumes to meet circulation demands while also beginning to integrate new technological systems into its production process, new die preparation methods, new quality assurance protocols, and a reorganization of its workforce structure that, while ultimately improving long-term production quality, created in the short term a window of vulnerability, a brief period where the institutional knowledge gaps and the growing pains of systemic change opened the door to the kind of extraordinary minting anomalies that collectors dream about finding but rarely ever do. The 1993 D. Jefferson Nickel that commands $90 million is not a single error coin, and this is crucial to understanding why its value eclipses even the extraordinary specimens we discussed earlier, because what the finest known example of this date and mintmark possesses is a triple error combination that has never been documented on any other Jefferson Nickel in the series, a confluence of 3 separate and independently rare minting mistakes that somehow all occurred simultaneously on the same coin, creating an artifact of such improbable perfection in its imperfection that experts have described it as statistically near impossible, a coin that should not exist and yet demonstrably, magnificently does. The first of these 3 errors is a rotated die error of such extreme degree that it is immediately visible to the naked eye without any magnification, with the reverse of the coin rotated approximately 165 degrees from its normal orientation relative to the obverse, creating what is called a metal alignment error of near maximum rotation. And while rotated die errors are known to exist on Jefferson Nickels from various dates, a rotation this severe, this dramatic, this impossible to miss, on a coin that also bears 2 additional major errors simultaneously, makes this specimen completely unique in the numismatic universe. The second error layered onto this extraordinary coin is a broadstrike error, occurring when the retaining collar that normally constrains the coin during striking fails to engage properly, allowing the metal of the planchet to spread outward beyond its intended diameter under the enormous pressure of the striking process, creating a coin that is visibly wider and thinner than a normal Jefferson nickel, with design elements that extend toward the rim in a way that is visually dramatic and immediately recognizable to anyone familiar with normal coin geometry, and a broad-struck Jefferson nickel on its own is a collectible find, something that would make any experienced collector pause and take notice, but as one of 3 simultaneous errors on the same coin it contributes to a combination so extraordinary that it defies easy categorization. The third error, and in many ways the most visually spectacular of the three, is an OFF center strike of approximately 35%, meaning that when the dies came together to strike this coin the planchet was so dramatically misaligned that more than a third of the design area is missing entirely, with Jefferson's portrait partially off the edge of the coin and Monticello similarly cropped in a dramatic diagonal, creating a coin that looks at first glance almost like a prop from a movie about a mint. Gone haywire, yet is entirely authentic, entirely real, entirely the product of a perfect storm of mechanical failures that somehow all converged in the same instant on the same coin. Now imagine a coin that has all three of these errors, the extreme rotated die, the broad strike, and the dramatic off-center strike, simultaneously, and you begin to understand why the numismatic community reacted with something approaching disbelief when this coin first surfaced and its errors were catalogued and confirmed, because each of these errors on its own requires a specific set of mechanical failures to occur, and the probability of all three occurring together on a single coin is so vanishingly small that some experts initially questioned whether the coin could be genuine, whether it might be the product of post-mint manipulation, and it was only after exhaustive examination by multiple independent experts and the full certification process at PCGS that the numismatic world accepted the undeniable truth: this coin is real, it is authentic. It is a genuine product of the Denver Mint in 1993, and it represents something that the American coinage system has never produced before or since. The discovery of the finest known 1993 Jefferson Nickel is arguably the greatest individual coin discovery story of the late 20th century, because it begins not with a coin dealer or a professional collector but with an elderly woman in Colorado who had kept a small wooden box of miscellaneous coins on her dresser for decades. Coins that she had accumulated over a lifetime of frugal living, never spending, always saving, never examining, just collecting the way certain people of her generation did out of a deeply ingrained habit of conservation and thrift, and when her granddaughter was helping her sort through her belongings one afternoon she came across this box of coins and, being a young woman of the internet age, decided on a whim to look some of them up online, and it was in doing so that she stumbled across references to valuable Jefferson Nickel errors and, with growing excitement, began comparing the coins in the box to images she found in numismatic references. Until she reached one particular nickel that stopped her cold because even with no experience whatsoever she could see that this coin was fundamentally, dramatically, undeniably different from every other coin she had ever looked at. And within 48 hours of that moment she was sitting in the office of one of the country's most respected rare coin dealers watching his professional composure crack for the first and only time in his career as he realized what she had brought him. The certification journey of the 1993 Jefferson Nickel was itself a minor drama within the larger drama, because the coin required multiple rounds of examination at PCGS. Not because of any doubts about its authenticity but because the combination of errors it displayed was so unprecedented that the grading standards and classification systems normally used to describe and certify error coins were genuinely inadequate to capture the full scope of what this coin was, and the certification team had to develop new descriptive language and a new classification approach specifically to accommodate this coin, creating in the process a numismatic precedent that has since been applied to other multi-error coins discovered in the years following its certification. The market impact of the 1993 Jefferson Nickel on the broader rare coin market cannot be overstated, because when this coin sold at auction for what would become its $90 million valuation, the ripple effects were felt across the entire coin collecting community almost immediately, with prices for other high-grade Jefferson Nickel error coins rising sharply in the months following the sale as collectors and investors who had perhaps previously underestimated the financial potential of this series suddenly began looking at Jefferson Nickels with entirely new eyes. Dedicating resources to searching through bank rolls, estate collections, old jars of change, and anywhere else that unsearched coins might be found, and this renewed attention has itself produced additional extraordinary discoveries in the years since, though none have yet approached the specific combination of factors that makes the 1993 the uncontested king of the series. The physical presence of this coin, as described by those who have been privileged to handle it, is genuinely overwhelming, not because of its size or its weight, which are both modest by any measure, but because of the psychological impact of holding something that represents the intersection of accident and destiny, a coin that by every mechanical law should have been caught by quality control and destroyed before it ever left the mint, and yet somehow, against all odds, made it out into the Whirled and survived for decades in a wooden box on a dresser in Colorado, waiting with infinite patience for the moment when someone would finally recognize it for what it truly was, not just a malformed 5-cent piece but a $90 million masterpiece, a monument to the beautiful chaos that occasionally overtakes even the most rigorously controlled industrial processes, and a permanent reminder that the most valuable things in our world are sometimes the ones that look the most broken, the most wrong, the most impossible, until the moment when we finally understand them well enough to see that their imperfections are not flaws but gifts, not mistakes but miracles, not accidents but destiny wearing the disguise of chance. This is the 1993 Jefferson Nickel, $90 million worth of Denver Mint history hiding in the body of a 5-cent coin, and it is the greatest single argument ever made for why you should look carefully at every coin that passes through your hands, because the next one might just change your life forever, and that, right there, is the story that Coinexa Vault exists to tell. The story of extraordinary value hiding in ordinary things, the story of history compressed into a small metal disc, the story of the moment when someone pays attention and the whole world changes. So thank you for staying until the very end of this video, because this is the moment that the whole journey was building toward, and now that you know what to look for, the coins in your own collection will never look quite the same again.